Okay. My name's Gemma Bellwood and I'm the Principal Social Worker for Adult Social Care. And when I was asked to come and present at this conference, the first thing that came into mind was capacity. And for anyone that knows me, that's not a difficult thing because it's something that I'm very passionate about. As a practitioner, I know how difficult it is to assess the capacity of young people with complex difficulties who are facing transition. Given the time constraints I've got today, I'm going to do a brief recap on the MCA. And from speaking to many of the practitioners within the teams in adult social care, it's the actual application of theory to practice that can be quite challenging when we look at capacity. So I thought it might be helpful to work through a capacity assessment together using a case study. Sam Fitzgerald's going to help me today with keeping an eye on the time. Sam's one of the team managers in mental health services, because I'm very mindful to stay within my 20-minute slot because I know you'll all want your coffee. So the MCA, the Act received royal assent in 2005 and came into force in 2007. It covers England and Wales and it provides a statutory framework for people who lack capacity to make decisions for themselves or who have capacity but want to make preparations for a time when they may lack capacity in the future. It sets out who can take decisions, in which situations and how to do it. The legal framework is supported by a code of practice, and if practitioners deviate from that, they have to give good reason why. So how does it apply to us in this room? Two of the categories apply directly to professionals, and I've quoted from the code of practice, and you'll see that it's about being paid for acts for or in relation to a person who lacks capacity. And like I said before, if the relevant guidance from the code of practice isn't followed, the worker needs to give good reason why they've departed from it. So some of the important things to know. The Act applies to anyone aged 16 and over, and certain decisions can never be made on someone's behalf. Assessments are decision and time specific, and the MCA works in conjunction with other legislation. So there's a Human Rights Act, MHA, which is a Mental Health Act, Data Protection Act, and it also sits very nicely within the Care Act too. Code of Practice advises that the decision maker has to take responsibility for the assessment. I'm sure you're all aware of these, but I'll just run through them again. The 5 statutory principles. A person must be assumed to have capacity unless it is established that they lack capacity. A person is not to be treated as unable to make a decision unless all practicable steps to help him or her have been taken without success. A person is not to be treated as unable to make a decision merely because it's seen as an unwise decision. Anything done for or on behalf of a person who lacks capacity must be done in their best interests, and anything done for or on behalf of a person who lacks capacity must be in the least restrictive of their rights and freedoms. I'm not going to discuss this case in length because of the time capacities that we've got, but it's a landmark case that changed how we document how we assess capacity. If you're interested, in the packs on your table where the mental capacity assessment tool is, there's a brief description of it, or you could Google it, I'll give you a little bit more information. But why is this a significant judgment? It's for a number of reasons. There's now a clear statement of law that capacity is decision specific, and whether the relevant information relates to an act or person depends upon the character of that decision. It represents a more fact-sensitive approach, reflecting the philosophy behind the MCA. And the Court of Appeal's approach to applying the statutory capacity test now differs in that it reorders the stages of the capacity assessment. So, if you would all look in your packs on your table, there should be a case study. If you would take a few minutes to read through the case study, and just so that we're all aware before we start, the decision that we would be assessing would be about Honey's ability to make decisions about her care and treatment. And then if you would if you would use the tool that's on your table, it's got the 4 questions. If you would work through it as a table and think about how and what questions you want to ask Honey to elicit the information that you will need to make a decision about whether she has capacity for that specific decision. Sam, myself and Bob Fletcher will be kind of wandering around the tables if you've got any questions. Yeah. Thank you. Honey is a 17-year-old white British female who's currently living in a secure unit under the framework of the Children Act after concerns arose regarding her mother's ability to both manage her challenging behaviours and keep her safe. She's now transitioning from children's services to adult social care, and professionals are considering what, if any, legal frameworks are appropriate for supporting her. She's been accommodated under Section 20 of the Children Act. She's lived in 4 alternative placements, each one breaking down as a result of her struggling to observe boundaries, causing physical harm to others, misusing substances, and that's resulted in treatment at one of the acute hospitals for the effects of alcohol, illegal highs and cannabis. She's been verbally abusive to staff and caused criminal damage to the properties. She's been reported missing on numerous occasions, 22, sharing with staff incorrect contact details of where she should be. When located by the police, she was in the company of adult males, some of whom were known to sexually exploit children. Honey would not disclose the identities of the males. She'd also posted intimate photographs of her body on social media, together with captions that could be considered provocative. She's spoken about wanting to end her own life and has managed her distress by taking an overdose of prescribed medication with the intent of ending her life on 2 occasions, 2013 and 2015. So she has a diagnosis of a mild learning disability, and professionals feel that her cognitive ability is significantly lower than her chronological age, which impacts on her ability to recognise the possible consequences to her safety in the choices that she makes. She's been referred to both CAMS and the Community Team for Learning Disability, but hasn't engaged. So I heard a lot of conversations on a lot of the different tables, and it was a really good exploration about what we need to be asking people when we assess capacity. So I thought it might be helpful now just to run through some of the questions that Sam and I thought about we'd be asking Honey to elicit that information. And please feel free to kind of feedback as well if there's anything that you think also would have been helpful to know. So the first one is, can she understand the information relevant to the decision? So first off, the most important is, does she know who she is? Does she know where she is? Does she know the circumstances that brought her to be living there? Does she understand your role and the possible outcomes of the assessment? Does she understand the concerns that people may have about her safety? And does she understand what care and treatment encompasses? So that's the starting point of your assessment. 2, can she retain that information? It doesn't have to be throughout the whole of the assessment, but it needs to be for the relevant bits. So, for example, your role, the plans that you make together, what led to her current circumstances, and what concerns people may have about her. And it's about retaining it long enough to make the decision in the here and now. This, I think, is the most difficult bit, the weighing up of information with which to make informed decisions. So this is what is driving her thought processes at this time. Does she understand the consequences of her decision making? And that's about unpicking it with her, and it's about being very blunt and saying, what do you think people are worried about? You've got lots of information in the case study about the number of times that she's been picked up by the police, by the difficulties that she had in the living situations where she was. It would be about asking her about that, asking for an explanation. Does she understand what people's concerns were? Number 4, can she communicate that decision? The decision that she communicates doesn't have to be what you want to hear, and sometimes it isn't. It's very important to communicate exactly what that person wants to share with you, because that is about their understanding of why you're there and what you're doing. So it can be done in lots of different ways, verbally, non-verbally. I've had people write down decisions, I've had people sign them to me, we've had blinks. It's how did you explore? Did you give her every means or every way possible of sharing what she wants to say to you? So you've done the first stage of the test. If there was one or more answers that she couldn't do, you then move on to the second stage. And this, remember I said it was flipped, this used to be the first stage. So is there an impairment of or a disturbance in the functioning of the person's mind or brain? Was it permanent, temporary or none? So if there was a diagnosis, who made it, when was it made, and how does it impact on her life? You'd want some kind of clarifying of that information on that bit. Does the impairment or disturbance make the person unable to make the decision, or is it likely to interfere with their ability to do so? Again, yes, no, but give an explanation of why that is. So, for example, if somebody is hearing voices that are telling them or directing them to do something, and that is all that they can think about at that time, to the exclusion of everything else, put that down, explain it. What is it that they're hearing? What is it that they're experiencing? So if you found that somebody lacked capacity for their decision making, you would move into using the framework of the MCA to support them. And then we'd be looking at best interests. I haven't got time to kind of go into that, but I just thought I'd put on there that this is principle 4. And then under section 5 of the MCA, this is just about us as professionals, what protection do we have when we're supporting people who lack capacity, and what protection we don't have.